Hi everyone, this is Dr. Moriarty again, and this is the second video I'm making on our Geometry Dash ripoff. So in this one, we are adding some collision. That's the big idea in this one. So you can see here that, there we go. So I've got that awesome explosion going on there. You'll probably want to replace that with something that looks a little bit more intense. And as you can see, in a later video for sure, we're going to need to adjust the jumping because the fact that, so right now we have it so we can only jump at one level, like pressing the up button down for longer periods of time is not having us jump higher. We only have one height in our jumps, and that's making this game really hard to beat. I do not have collision set up for these other types of shapes in our map. It's only the bottom purple triangles, not the top purple triangles or these platforms that are set up yet. Hopefully my students are able to figure that out based on the partial collision function that I gave them. Okay. So the map is a little bit different because we have more shapes showing up. Function declaration, our collision function is a function that we have to hand some stuff. I did goof up a little bit on this when I was making it. Just so you guys know, I actually don't need to hand it the map like this, like we did with Pac-Man. Because when you made Pac-Man, you probably had your map be a local map to main, like we might have put it right there or something. I made this map global, just in case we wanted to add other classes or things that wanted to have access to it without having to constantly pass parameters. So you don't actually need to hand it to it because it's global. Everybody, including functions outside of main, can see it, but it's certainly not going to hurt anything that I passed it as a parameter. You definitely want to pass the player's X and Y position and then the offset that we're calculating inside because those are variables we've declared inside main and therefore are local to main. Okay? Already talked about the scrolling in the last video, so let's just kind of go for the fun stuff here. Already talked about, there's the scrolling again from the last time. Okay, so here's our actual collision function getting called in the timer section of our game loop, because you know the timer section is what handles most of the physics. So we're just calling the collision, and we're seeing if it spits out a 1. At the moment, that's the only thing that it returns other than a 0. A 0 means it's collided with nothing. But later on, we're going to have different things being returned, and the game's going to do different things. Like if you are colliding with a platform, you should be able to land on the platform, assuming it's your feet that have landed on it and not like your head. Okay? So, what we're going to do is if we have collided, this is this derpy explosion graphic that you see. So if you check out these yellow circles that happen when I hit something, see how they just kind of expand like that? So what I did to make that happen is I just have a for loop because I have about 5 circles appearing, even though it says 100 here because we're counting by 20s. That means it only actually runs 5 times. So I'm drawing a filled circle, and this, if you hover over it, remember it tells you the parameters. So I've got the center X position, the center Y position, and then the radius. So this is the radius, and I'm adding 20 to the radius every time we go through this game loop. Sorry, not this game loop, this little for loop inside our game loop. This actually draws it to the screen. And notice I don't have a clear to color in here, so the rest of the game stays there. I'm not erasing the purple squares or anything like that. I'm just drawing this extra explosion on top of things, and that's the color yellow approximately. So the first circle is just has a radius of 2 pixels, so it's not really barely even visible. The next time through it has 22 of a radius, and then 42, etc., until it gets up to 100. With a quick little 0.2 second pause in between each, which might even be like 2. We might want to adjust that because it's still kind of a long explosion. we actually aren't doing anything with lives right now, so you can play this as many times as you want, and the computer is happily keeping track of the fact that you might have like negative 20 lives and is not killing the game. Eventually we'll update the game loop, so once you get under 0 lives, it says game over and kicks you out. We do reset the player's position, and we reset the map so it's off the screen again and starts scrolling back in, because you don't want to have the map stay where it's at in case you are landing on a triangle. That wouldn't really be fair. Unless you want to not be fair. You know, there's definitely games out there that are not fair. But I do reset my map and my player position, so it's kind of like starting over. Okay. Render section got a little bit more complicated because we are drawing those extra shapes. So you guys already saw this line in the last video. This is the bottom purple triangles. To probably label that just so you don't have to think too hard about figuring it out. These are the top purple, the upside down. Okay, and then these are my platforms. Okay, and remember the only this one in my collision function is set up to actually collide with. These two don't really do anything other than draw. I did move this. I think in the previous video I had this at the bottom of my render section. I don't know why. That's a terrible place to put it. I have this at the beginning because if you have it at the bottom, the last thing it does is erase everything. Like it'll show it, but then it'll erase everything, which normally isn't a big deal because it runs so quickly. It's going to draw it again really fast. But the problem was with having it here is when my explosion started, because this hadn't been drawn yet, as soon as the explosion started, you couldn't see any of the rest of the map, which didn't look right at all. Okay? All right, here's the collision function. It's really simple at the moment, simpler than Pac-Man at the moment because I'm only checking one point. With Pac-Man, we checked multiple points along Pac's edge. We checked like the top right corner and the bottom right corner, and then a lot of times even the middle right corner if he was moving right. And then we were also checking like different points if he was moving left or up or down. We don't need to do that with Geometry Dash because we are always moving right in this game because the map is always flying at us in a right, you know, it's scrolling left, so it's always seems like we're moving right, even though our player isn't really moving at all. Like he'll move a little bit. I actually think it might be a good idea, speaking of that, to like turn off these two. Because I think in the game, he doesn't actually move left or right. He just kind of moves up when you jump. And then it's the map that moves around him. So to be really legit, you might want to turn those off. But I don't think it's really like detracting from the gameplay right now, so I'll leave that on. So we really only need to check in the right-hand direction. I'm assuming we're moving right. This was just me making sure that it works. You don't actually need that cout statement. That was me, because at first it wasn't working that great, so I put that in there just to make sure. What I had done, my bug that I found out by putting this cout statement in, is that I had these reversed. You actually want the Y in here and the left in here, and I know that's kind of counterintuitive. It just has to do with like how the for loop is running through stuff in the render section. So anyways, we are adding 30 to our Y because that's the size of your player. So you're actually wanting to check his bottom coordinates, not his top. Because if you don't add that 30, he's not gonna collide, and like if his feet run into the triangle, he's still fine. It's not until his head runs into it, which isn't how the game works. You want as soon as he hits it, whether it's his feet or whatever, he dies. Okay? We're dividing by 30 because that's what we are multiplying by to get this to actually look right on the screen. Okay? And then with our X position, we are also adding 30 because we want to check along his right-hand edge because the map is flying at us and it's going to hit our right-hand edge first. This 5 is because I want to actually kind of look ahead a little bit of him. You might want to take this off because he might collide a little bit before he hits the triangle, and that might not look right. So, like, that's kind of a remnant of what was happening in Pac-Man. You shouldn't really need that. But you can put it in if that's the way that you want your game to feel. But you do definitely want to add the offset. because otherwise it's going to be comparing to the static non-moving map. So you're going to be colliding with random invisible triangles and not the triangles you see. So definitely add that offset to the X. We're not scrolling the Y. The map isn't scrolling up and down. It's only scrolling from left to right. So you only need to add the offset to the X. Okay? Again, dividing by 30 because that's how big my all the shapes in my game are. Okay? And we're only checking for ones in my map. Okay, so that's why I have a 1 there. And so right now we're only colliding with the ones, which are the right side up purple triangles. Okay, otherwise we're returning 0. We're saying no collision. Okay, so that's the basics. If you guys are able to expand this, I would love to see you try, and you can show me when you have attempted. At least try to get the collisions going on with like the top one. I'll give you a hint, the math is actually basically the same, so it should be pretty easy. I mean, a couple adjustments in there, but try to get it to collide with the top ones if you can. That might be difficult to test because I don't think our jump is going to get us up that high, but you could draw a couple of those top rectangles maybe a little bit lower, like on the bottom of some platforms like the game actually does, for testing purposes. Great! So we are making good progress on this. As you can see, we're not too far off from being done with the basics of the game. And then you'll probably want to add some fun bells and whistles to make it look a little bit more professional, because this is just kind of like the basic physics. It's not really any of the cool graphics or sound that the real game has that makes it super fun. All right, best of luck!